What is this thing? Why is it absurd? Why did you build it?
Yes, it's absurd because the web storage APIs are just absurd. And this adds on additional layer of absurdity. It's because essentially I really wanted to use SQLite in the browser. And so to do that, you can use a WebAssembly compiled version of SQLite. And so there's this big binary blob that you can download and it runs just fine. The problem is that it doesn't persist. And so in SQLite, usually it persists, it knows how to persist to disk by writing out in individual small chunks, usually on the size of like 4K blocks. And so as the data changes, it writes those blocks down into the disk. The recommended way that I've seen before to persist SQLite databases before is to actually just write the entire database to like IndexedDB. And so you're literally, if you have a 10 megabyte database, every single change you're writing down an entire 10 megabyte string, like encoded string. It's totally ridiculous and horrible. Like that's just not going to work. And so the absurdity comes into play because the way that this works is it hooks into SQLite's APIs to write things down, and it basically captures those requests. It basically acts like a file system. So SQLite tells the file system to write down these 4K blocks, and then the file system goes and says, okay, I'm going to go and write them down on your hard drive. Well, with Absurd SQL, what it does is it takes those blocks and it writes them down into IndexedDB. And so if you look in IndexedDB in actual, you'll see and you look at that database, you'll just see a bunch of pages, meaning like each row, or not pages, each row is a block. And so there's each row of a 4K binary like array buffer. And so it's absurd. The one level of absurdity is that it's translating SQLite, which is this normal database thing, into IndexedDB. There's another level of absurdity where there used to be this thing called Web SQL, which actually was SQLite provided as a web API. So you could literally run like SQLite queries directly in the browser, and that was like another alternative to IndexedDB. IndexedDB won out, so unfortunately we need to do this weird hack where we store it in IndexedDB. Now the absurdity goes even deeper because most browsers use SQLite internally to implement IndexedDB. And so technically speaking, when you're using Absurd SQL to like store the SQLite data in IndexedDB, what's happening is that it's storing it in IndexedDB in these individual blocks. IndexedDB is then taking that and cutting it up differently and putting each of those blocks in different things inside of a SQLite table on your local machine.